Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan podcast, where every journey is worth living. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm your host for today's episode. I'm a bilingual neurolinguistic programming and cognitive behavior psychotherapist specializing in anger management issues, both court-appointed and private, marriage counseling using the EFT method, dissociative disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, depression, anxiety, dream analysis, and also provide life, business, and retirement coaching support. I provide individual one-on-one session in both French or English, and also do group settings. If you need any assistance, reach out to DMV Therapy and Coaching Services at 301-325-1550, and our website can be found at lifecoach.amslife.com. Today, I'm very excited to have for our fifth episode of season 15, a very special guest and conflict resolution expert and mediator, Kimberly Best. And just like every of my past episode, I will leave it up to the guests to properly introduce themselves, as no one can do a better job. Kimberly, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dan. And I want to say thank you for the work that you do too. Your scope of work is very much needed. Thank you. Yes, I'm in near Nashville, Tennessee, and I work in conflict management at all levels between conflict coaching individuals, interpersonal conflict, organizational conflict, and on a social level as well. So I think conflict management skills is something that few of us have learned, and we pay the price for not knowing those because we keep doing the things we do learn, and when it doesn't work, we do it even harder, and things get a little more complicated when that happens. So I really like my work. I've been a registered nurse since 1980. I don't practice in nursing anymore, but I worked in trauma in the emergency department, and I feel like that working in conflict is kind of the emergency room for the soul.
That's so good. And thank you again so much for being a part of our podcast, because again, when people are holding on too much conflict internally, their happiness is actually, compromised. And we see a lot of conflict in marriages as well because of a lack of communication on how they interact with each other. And when we do not have that communication pattern that is healthy, then we end up always not understanding each other. And this is where the dialogue just breaks. So do you work also with married couples, Kimberly, or is it mostly, organizational?
No, I do a lot of couples, and I even, as a Rule 31, that's our Supreme Court rostered mediator here in Tennessee, I actually do some family or divorce mediations as well. Okay. And I reality test those because I find, and you probably do in your practice, that people have so much conflict and are in so much pain that they use the D word as a trump card, not necessarily because they don't want it to work out, but because they don't know what else to do to help ease the pain, and getting out of it is, seems like their only alternative. Unfortunately, once you put that word out there, the whole world conspires to keep you on that divorce train. And, you end up convincing yourself why this is a good thing without looking at the options of resolving that. And not that in some cases it's not, the best thing for both people. But sometimes people really don't want to be there. Mm-hmm. So in the acrimony that is divorce, I work in that space too, so that there's an option of going through that with a decreased acrimony and working collaboratively, especially when there's kids involved, so that you're not breaking the relationship any more than it already is. And then you have options besides demonizing the other person, which is what typically happens in divorce.
But do you think also, Kim, that it is a generational issue? Because our grandparents, they were doing everything in their power to be able to fix the relationships and replacing it. But now, with so many options that we have out there in the dating scene, people are more likely to say, well, the grass is greener on the other side, because the grass that right now, it's really yellow, it's really bad, it's dead, so might as well just go and change. But then, do we give ourselves enough time, enough effort to really work on the problem instead of just trying to replace it?
Well, most of the time we think it's the other person's fault. So no, we don't work on it. The only thing we were really good at is blame. And I would suggest that the prior generations maybe didn't know how to fix it so much as they did how to live with it, or even how to ignore it. Okay. But you're right, having more options gives us a quick out. And it is true that people are sure that the grass is always greener. And you and I know, and everyone knows deep down, that there's a price to pay for every decision.
Oh my God, yes.
And you don't even know what a big price you're paying by going through the divorce, and especially with children, it's a legacy price. You know, we're teaching our children how to handle relationships and how we do relationships and how we do them when it's difficult and how we break away from them if that's what needs to happen. So we forget that we're creating a legacy.
So would you say, Kim, that in your effort to be able to bring peace and serenity, either in couples or organizational or anything of that sort, do you feel that the environment that people are in, either in a closed ship such as relationship versus organization, what would you prefer, or what do you feel it to be more easy to deal with conflict? Is it more when it's in a family environment or organizational?
That's a great question. I think the tenets of conflict are the same regardless.
Okay.
But the emotional investment in a relational one is higher than an organization or a business, though they can be pretty powerful, especially around social, political, community types of things. Work-related organizations, you have another life to go back to. But in our private relationships, those kind of our lives are centered around those. So I think your work people know you as the work person you are. Your relationships at home know all of you, and there is a difference there.
So it is because it's impacting us in an emotional level when we deal with our spouse and our children that we feel more impacted, because if that is not stable, then nothing else afterwards follows. Everything just come crumbling down like a deck of cards. So do you feel that people will have the tendency to be able to put in more effort in their close-knit environment than their work environment, because they could say, well, I could change job anytime, or I could get fired anytime. So I don't have that same attachment. So for them, they're not going to put as much effort versus their family, but yet 50% of the marriage end up in divorce. So what is their mindset?
Yeah, I would suggest that the opposite is what occurs. I think sometimes in families, we're like, oh, that's our family, and they're just there. And we put our effort into seminars, into continuing education, into making sure people like us at work. We don't put that effort into families very often. We want promotions in our job. I mean, I think we work harder to make ourselves better in our jobs, and too many times let the families be second. I think we tend to treat people better outside of our families than we do inside. And I think just to shift the sense of priority, and also maybe to make an internal commitment to, I will not treat someone that I love worse than I treat a stranger.
But then it goes both ways, two directions, because if, let's say, you had a crappy day at work, you're going to bring that crap into the home. But then if you have a crappy home environment, you bring that to work. So that it works both ways when it comes to your mental state of mind. But yet the personal space gets more, I would say, dismissed and not put so much attention than the work environment. So how do you encourage people, especially who are going through difficult marriage problems, to be able to kind of bring some sense of balance?
Oh, what a good question. So I think our tendency to compartmentalize when we go off to work is bigger than our ability to do it in our family. We kind of switch to our work mode, which you're right, is all of us. So we're doing a part of me is present for this, but the relationship you is always underneath that. So you can put that aside. It is true, we can bring our work negativity home. I think awareness, I mean, what you just defined is something to be aware of in yourself and see what you're doing. And I think, being one person and not two people, the work person and the home person, maybe growing as a whole person, is a way to be able to take care of both at the same time.
So if we look at the principle of causality, the cause and effect, do you think that when people do not have work-life balance mastered, is where everything comes crumbling down, because they do not know where to put more attention to the other. And because of this, either they put too much time at work and then the family suffers, or obviously they're not going to put too much time at the family, because then their work will suffer and they will get fired. They will not have enough money to provide for the family. So where does a work-life balance actually exist?
Oh, I'm glad you asked it that way, because my partner's always talking about us finding equilibrium, and I honestly don't even know what that looks like. It's more like juggling to me than finding an equilibrium. But I think it's about showing up where you need to be. So when we're coming from a sense of scarcity, it's like I gave everything at work, I have nothing left for home, or vice versa. Well, we don't have a limited supply, even though it feels like we do. But I think being intentional on who you want to be in your family, how you want to show up, who you want to be viewed at. I mean, you have to, just like you do in your job, you have to be purposeful, and it takes a little bit more effort, because you can't just shut out the people who you're pouring your life into remotely. So it takes a little bit more effort, but the rewards are probably worth it.
So, but then rewards, it's relative to how you perceive them to be, because
That's right.
Bring life to, I mean, if you bring love to the family, some people, it depend on their love language, so the Chapman
That's right.
language. And then again, we see families still, like, if the man puts in the work and it's never sufficient enough, or it doesn't meet the expectation of the spouse, of the wife, then this comes crumbling down. And then the guy is going to say, well, I put everything in it and it's never enough. So where, and this is again a very, very, I would say, challenging question, Kim, but where is there a balance in the love between spouses? What if we stop with those expectations? Do you feel that the communication will arise, will be able to get better, more fluid, versus people expecting too much from the other, and this is where everything comes crumbling down?
Yeah. So you're right. A lot is around expectation. I, and what you spoke before about love languages, I find a lot of times in couples, each person is working as hard as they can to give what they think the other person wants. And the other person isn't feeling it because it isn't what they want. That's not, you empty the dishwasher, you put dinner on the table, whatever it is, I do these things. They're not registering on this is what I want in the relationship. We don't have the conversation. It takes bravery to say what you really need and to ask. Like for me, it all comes around asking, working together collaboratively to figure out who does what. Then your hard work is meeting somebody where they need it, and it will be appreciated. But if you work super, super hard thinking you're doing what you in a role think you're supposed to be doing, it's probably not landing on your partner because it isn't what they need. So ask.
Yeah, but then again, if let's say there is the division of chores, I'm not sure if you read this article, Kim. I think it was from Switzerland or something, that when the women were taking care more of the chores of the family, there was a better sense of community, a sense of love between the spouses. And then, of course, for the US side, they said, oh no, we're men and women. There has to be a equal division of chores, or else there's going to be some resentment, some hate, and so on and so forth. So when it comes to, if I do a chore, but the man doesn't do it to the expectation of the woman, and then the woman always feel that she has to be coming afterwards and putting the rest. So if he's doing things at 70%, she's going to have to put the extra 30%. And then after a while, she's going to say, what's the point? He's always doing it wrong. And then the man feels the negativity. So he feels that he doesn't want to participate anymore. And that creates that with this division between both. So how do we, or how can you tell women, or the woman who's listening, 7% of them on our podcast, how can you tell, you know what, whatever they're trying to do, that's already A for effort. So you have to kind of like start working with them and being more grateful and appreciate versus always condemning them.
Yeah, no, I know men experience that a lot. And when I first heard you explaining this, what came into my head was the word scorecard. Like we all have to let go of our scorecard because that will not serve us in any positive way in a relationship. And then the talking down. I think you've probably done some family system stuff. There are three people. There are a lot more than that in us, but we can be functioning on our personality as either a parent, an adult, or a child. And the parent is telling a partner what to do or what they're doing wrong. They're criticizing, they're correcting, they're scolding. And I do see both sides, men and women, talking to each other like that. We're not children, and no one likes to be talked to that way. Then there's the child part, the part of us that's whining, that's complaining, that's expecting somebody to fix something for us. And then there's the adult person, and that's who we show up when we're in a mature relationship, in a work relationship, you and I having a dialogue that you're challenging a little bit and I'm challenging a little bit back, but we're not going to start calling each other names for that. We're in our adult roles. Yes. We might. Is that what you're saying, Dr. Dan? Too soon to say.
Just respect. That's it, as you mentioned.
It is respect. Absolutely is respect. That's a very good word for it. So bringing that to the conversation can be the game changer, because nobody feels respected when they're talked down to. They feel inferior. You're in a position above them talking to somebody below. It kind of reminds me, Dan, a story I'll share that a very good friend of mine decades ago said to me, when I fight with my husband, I always win. Because I'm better at words, I'm more assertive, I always win. And then one day I realized that in order to win, I had to make him lose.
True.
And I want to love enough that I don't make someone lose. And that works for right, wrong too, because we argue about right, wrong all the time. If I have to be right, I have to make you wrong. Mm-hmm. And I want to care enough about you and me, who I am, to not have to make you wrong. What a perspective, right?
That's a very interesting perspective. But then again, if you look at competitions, there's always going to be one winner, and the rest of the people are going to lose the first place. So
that's a good point. In sports.
Yeah, in sports primarily, yes. But then when you look at when you listen the Gottman Institute, when he talks about the 4 horsemen, which most people actually go through, and especially the stonewalling part, okay, which is already like now ignoring the other person, putting a wall in front of you, not listening to them. But this can, okay, if let's say you go to a point where there's so much conflict in a relationship, Kim, and the person is so fed up and they felt like they're being talked in a condescending way or accusatory or being blamed constantly, what would we blame them to stonewall the other person? Because enough is enough. There's just so much that someone can take. So does that mean after they've reached the stonewalling that there's no way to go back and no way to reopen the line of communication?
Yeah, I think there's never no way, except maybe in the case of some personality disorders. Yes. Right? So I feel like in mediation and conflict management, I say that when we have those moments, we do perceive a wall, like you said. And my job as a conflict manager is to turn that wall into a door, because it's the what next. Okay, you stonewalled. What next? Okay, I talked down to you or whatever to you. What next? How do we fix that? How do we bridge that? How do we repair that? Instead, we hit a wall and we just go back with that wall there and that hurt inside of us. And I think it piles on until that pile can become so big that it is easier to leave than unpack it. The ticket to that, the key to that, I think, is learning conflict management skills, learning communication skills. I think the stonewalling, the person being stonewalled tells themselves a story about the other person and why they're doing it. But let's get curious and find out, because maybe they just don't know what else to do. Maybe they're just so hurt they can't approach you. Both sides for me always is a degree of hurt. And in conflict, when I'm sitting there almost every time, with the exception of personality disorders, sitting in the shoes of either person, I can see exactly where they're coming from. Not exactly, but to the degree an outsider can, I know where they're coming from, and they're not right or wrong. They're living in their biology, they're living in their past, they're doing what the only thing they know how to do, and so is the other person. There's just no bridge between those.
So in all of your conflict resolution, do you encourage what we've been taught about reflective listening? And with that part where a lot of people, kind of like first listen, they digest what the other person is saying, then they basically paraphrase what the other person said to really take accountability of what the other person tried to tell them or tried to convey. But then again, I had a podcast with a very, very interesting PhD holder, and he said that reflective listening is outdated. Now what we need to do is more emotional validation, where we try to kind of understand their emotional perspective versus just the word that comes out of their mouth. And we thought as therapists, reflective listening is one of the most, like basic part, which I understand, but then we don't really know and focus on their emotional aspect of why do they feel the way they feel, not what of the word that comes out of their mouth, because it could be, again, misinterpreted by the brain, and certain words are coming out which you didn't really mean.
Yeah, no, it's true. I know people think they're supposed to listen, so they sit there and listen without speaking the whole time they're planning their counter, and they're